Hello, you Mordorians, and thank you to Gandalf131 for our 131 or whatever. Thanks, Gandalf, for introducing with the malt mention Ralphie Review 1051, in which I'm reviewing a less well-known single malt Scotch whisky, which I bought at my local basic supermarket on significant discount. Now, it's very telling in the UK at the moment that some whiskies, and it tends to be the brands that you and I very rarely discuss, and it's certainly not a name that tends to appear in the OSWA list, that's the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. You'll find a link down in the description box. But this is one that it makes a good change for me to review this, because it's been deeply discounted in the supermarket, and it's exactly the sort of whisky which is packaged and presented not to the self-taught, experienced whisky fan like you and I, but for the sort of people who never watch a Whisky Bothy video. It's the passive consumer, the occasional buyer, the people who wouldn't buy whisky unless it was in a significant price reduction at a certain time of year. The time of year is October, November, towards the end of the year, where you have the highest volume of whisky sales. Here's my receipt from the cooperative where I bought it. Apart from buying a mango, I bought some mango and oranges, and British chicken, what else did I buy? Well, I bought a few food items, the practical stuff, you know, that sort of people that go to a gym buy. Fresh fruit that's got protein in it, and you actually have to prepare it through a process called cooking. You know, people still do that, you know, these days. But where's my steampunker? Because the ink isn't particularly clear in these things. So here we have a bottle of whisky reduced to £24 a bottle, which is roughly about $26, $27 a bottle. That's what it is. £24 a bottle, but you can find it on the online retailers, the specialist retailers, for a nearer £40 a bottle. And it's 40% volume, so the basic minimum. It's heavily chill filtered. It doesn't carry an age statement, and it's got a special finish. It's been finished in, and I'll read it out to you, red wine cask edition, French Cabernet Sauvignon cask finish. And it says underneath that this is the American oak and French Cabernet Sauvignon red wine casks. So that means, if I'm interpreting this correctly, and you've got to be careful, by the way, because labelling can be misleading, and deliberately so. But the way I'm interpreting this is a young whisky that spent most of its life in ex-bourbon casks of a fairly average quality. And to actually beef it up a little bit, they've given it this red wine finish, but not just any old red wine. They have directed the messaging towards French Cabernet Sauvignon, which is arguably, certainly in the UK, the most recognisable style of red wine that people tend to buy. In fact, it's so recognisable, it's really quite ubiquitous. So I think that the producers at Tamnavullen are looking for people who don't know much about whisky and are not regular whisky drinkers, but they love a bargain, don't we all? To go ahead and buy it because of the exoticness of the wine finish. I don't see any information how long that finish is, but I can tell you right now that when you've poured a glass the previous day, sipped a little bit, and then put a lid on it, which just happens to be a jam jar lid, because it's perfectly competent, and then you nose it, the experiences are substantially different. In the glass I've just poured, I'm getting lovely red fruit strawberry jam notes. That's how I would describe it. Strawberry jam. Slightly sweet, slightly oaked strawberry jam. And within a short space of time, that will lift off, which is always a sign of the length and depth of the finishing. And the following day, when you come back to the dram, what you're going to smell are basically the presence and the activity of the original ex-bourbon casks, minus the strawberry jam, which is kind of basically evaporated away, because the engagement has been so short term that it really didn't hang around, it didn't integrate and mesh in with the rest of the whiskey. So when I taste it, and to the credit, there's actually a little bit of Scotch mist in there. So, all credit to Tamnavulin, they haven't brutally chill filtered it, but it's certainly heavily filtered to make sure it's clear at 40%. But the original whiskey, and I'm starting with this as a point of reference to give this review context, it's slightly sour, honeycomb, barley sugar, definitely barley sugar, slightly, what I would call it, being kind, I would call it sake barley sugar, light barley, yeasty, slightly butyric on the nose, which is slightly sour cream in the nose. When you taste it, you're immediately reminded of your average blended Scotch, which has that sort of slightly yeasty, sherbety, gingery, barley sugar note to it. Now we're coming to the fresh pour. Let's put this aside. Completely different experience. As soon as you nose it, you get actually a very plausible red fruit, slight red currant, strawberries, a little bit of rhubarb, perhaps gingery note. The nose is absolutely dominated by what I recognise and acknowledge is actually pretty fresh wine casks. They really are quite fresh, but there again, I'm honestly wondering if the wine has actually been imported in the cask to Scotland to be used for finishing, because the market for red wine at the moment globally is really, really bad. And so you can buy casks of wine relatively cheaply. They're not difficult to source. And importantly, once the red wine has been sort of emptied out the cask, perhaps it's boiled down to make a flavoursome type Paxaret syrup. I don't know, but certainly the nose is very concocted. It is super finished. Now, as an experienced whiskey drinker, you'll know what that means, because you've encountered them in your sherry monsters in the past, in particular. Taste-wise, I'm not even going to add water, which is highly unusual for me, because water is just going to weaken it further. It really doesn't help to bring out the flavour of the barley, which is frankly anemic. And it really comes across when we're tasting the day after, when the finish has lifted. The arrival is that red fruit. It doesn't linger. It moves on swiftly, doesn't hang about. You can see where this is going. I'm glad I only paid £24 for this and not a penny more. But it's important for me to give perspective and balance in my channel, that I do review whiskies that someone who's maybe just getting into whiskey for the first time and they want someone's opinion, and they happen to be given this to see in the new year, and they put some soda water in it and it wasn't too bad, and they quite like that slightly sweet kind of red fruit note, it starts to make sense of the label. But the finish is super fast. There's really not a lot going on. It's absolutely possessed, dominating and led by a short-term wine cask finish, which you've got to be wary of, because a lot of wine cask finishes in Scotch whisky generally do not work, particularly when they're older. And they're saying things like Chateau d'Yquem, Chateau de Margaux, Chateau Mouton Rothschild. They're starting to name bling to suggest that their whisky is of better quality because of the alleged reputation of the source of the wine. I would recommend you do not buy into this at all. Without doubt, in my experience, the most successful wine maturation, because it wasn't a finish, it was a double maturation of some substance, has been the Lecheik Sinclair Series Rioja finish. And the reason is that Rioja is a particularly tannic wine. And unlike French wines, which mature in the bottle over time, young other European red wines like Chianti, Rioja, Deo, they actually work better when they're younger and more elemental and more zesty and more gutsy. And that's what I really enjoy about these wines. I do not like a heavily matured, super expensive branded wine, because I feel that there's a lot of pretension going on, particularly in Britain, which is a very pretentious country, frankly. I know, you don't agree, oh, Ralph, you don't get conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. No, I'm British. I'm indigenous, right? I have been observing this my entire life. Britain is a terribly snooty, snobby country and very conservative at heart. And too many people have been bigging up some competent wines in order to justify to themselves a ridiculously high price tag. Does this sound familiar? Yeah, of course it does. It's really creeping into whisky now. Please be careful what you're paying for whisky. I'm going to give this a malt mark now. I'm really not going to dive any further deeper into this. For someone that's new into whisky, they're going to enjoy it. They'll like it. The finish it's a nice finish for someone who wants an anemic, simple, blend style single malt. 73 out of 100. There you have it. I've only ever reviewed one other Tamna Vullen on my channel in 15 years. What does that tell you? And that was an independent bottling from the Single Malts of Scotland, where I gave it 84 out of 100, which at that point in Ralphie Review 513, back in January 2015, was not a particularly impressive mark. You know, enough said. See you soon.